There are two communication systems, but today's talk is on electricity. Right now, you have electricity flowing through your body. An ideal state for the body can be attained because it's part of Mother Nature's blueprint, predicated on an electrical system. The specialists of the human body are the ones who really understand how power should flow, and they're the troubleshooters of that power flow, and they're also the enablers of that power flow. If you don't know why, it's a lot of guesswork. You might get lucky, but more often than not, you don't. This is where chiropractors come into the equation. You're listening to Breakthrough Radio from Breakthrough Healthcare in Jacksonville. I'm your host, Frank, here to report how to break through what's holding you back to achieving the wellness lifestyle you want. Join me as I help to bring you more self-awareness and assist Dr. Randy Haas and friends to help you increase your vitality, longevity, and enjoyment of life. It all starts right here with your next breakthrough. And yes, it's your host again, Frank, here at Breakthrough Radio Jacksonville, coming at you today with tremendous wattage behind me of all the wellness power there is right here at Breakthrough Healthcare here in Jacksonville. We're having a wellness party that has lasted so far 4 episodes and counting, and we have no intention of stopping. So I want to welcome you back here to the show. As you know, this show is here for you to understand more about wellness, more about health, and about taking care of yourself, and then helping others in the process. But more than that, here at Breakthrough Healthcare, the practice is predicated on getting you help to be able to live a wellness lifestyle. And that's what we're all here to do. And speaking of that wellness lifestyle, today's episode is no different than the previous episodes as far as what I have in mind to talk about to you today. And it's very important. So make sure you're sitting there and ready to take this in, because this is a very important topic I'm about to discuss with you. It's so foundational. And what I want to talk to you today about is going to seem a little bit unrelated, because I'm going to talk to you about electricity. Today we're going to talk about electricity. We're going to take you back to your science classes of years gone by, back in elementary school. But I want to talk to you about electricity because it's an excellent parallel and actually a direct relation to what's going on inside your body right now. And it has everything to do with what we do here at Breakthrough Healthcare. And I want to let you know, because until you understand the very nature of the flow of power itself in terms of electricity, then you're underutilizing the power of what we do here at Breakthrough Healthcare. Now, as you know, Dr. Haas is a chiropractor, and chiropractic is actually a science of the flow of electricity. Believe it or not, it's the science of the flow of electricity. And that is what Dr. Haas is a specialist in. Now stay with me here, because that's going to make a lot of sense to you in a few minutes. But whether he's practicing therapeutically chiropractic or not, or whether he's practicing nutrition response testing, NRT, to do nutritional assessments, he's working with electricity. And he's able to accomplish such effective treatment because of the fact that he understands electricity, how it flows, what inhibits its flow, what encourages or empowers its flow, what opens up its flows, what makes the flow possible in the first place. By knowing these details, Dr. Haas is actually able to affect change, positive change in the body. So let's talk about basic electricity. Now, when Radio Shack was still around, you could actually go down there and buy a Science of Electricity kit. And it was great. It showed you how a basic circuit worked, and it had a little light bulb. You can screw a light bulb into a socket, and then you had different wires and different terminals, and you can hook up the wires and actually route and reroute electricity to understand how and in which direction electricity flows. Now, we're not going to do a PhD on electricity today, and thankfully, you don't have to be an electrician or a professor of science. You don't even have to be a doctor to understand what we're going to go over today. As a matter of fact, it's crucial that you understand this. If you are the owner and operator of a human body, then this is for you today. So let's get into it. How does electricity flow? Why does it flow? Where does it come from? What happens with electricity? Let's start with the example of your house. Electricity has to flow into your house. Why? Because you need electricity to power the things that power your life. The device you're listening on right now is powered by electricity. That electricity flows through that device, and it enables it to do the things that it does. And depending on the quality of the circuitry inside that device, depending on that quality of electric flow, will determine the outcome of how it's going to perform. Now, of course, it's very logical and almost overly elementary to bring this up, but electricity flows along a circuit in there, and if that gets interfered with in some way, obviously the device isn't going to work very well. But this could be any appliance in your house. So let's take the example of a rolling blackout. What does that mean when that happens? Well, let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at the basics that support electricity. Electricity flows along electrical wires that you see outside in the street, and you see them spurring off, and they go into your house or your apartment building or wherever you're at, your office, what have you. And all you see is electricity flowing in a linear fashion along those wires. That's all you see. But if you were to really back up and maybe go up to a satellite view of that electrical system, what you would essentially see is a circle. And that's where we get the word circuit from. It actually implies a circular motion. In a circle, that's what a circuit means. So there has to be a circle for electricity to flow. It has to end up where it started for there to be a flow of electricity. And that is what we want to go on. That is what I want you to really take away from this, that's what's required. So when you see those power lines, they're part of a larger circle that's made, and it's a very intricate and complex circle, but the bottom line is a circle. And that's what we're looking at here. So there is circuitry. Now, what happens during a storm? A tree limb falls on the power line and it breaks the connection. What you've done there is not just break a linear flow into your house. What you've done is you've broken the circle and made the power not able to flow along that circle, and the energy stops. Now, interestingly enough, that energy is going to back up somewhere because it's still being created and it's got nowhere to flow. That's an interesting takeaway. You should hold that in mind for a little bit later when we relate this to you, because this is very much going to relate to you. Right now, you have electricity flowing through your body. So the power comes into your house, and if something interferes with that circuit, the appliances inside your house, your TV, your refrigerator, your lights, your computers, your toaster, your coffee maker, all those things are going to either experience a lessening of power, and they're going to operate at less than full potential or capacity, or they're going to stop working completely. And this is the bottom line of the flow of electricity. That's all you need to take away from that analogy. Now, why does the body have electricity flowing through it? Especially since we all know that the, quote, fuel for the body is to intake nutrition, food. We know that's fuel. But think about your car right now. Your car actually has a couple of types of fuel. You have a battery in your car, and you also have a fuel tank. You have to put fuel in the tank. The car has to eat, quote unquote, and digest that gasoline for it to be able to operate in the first place. But it needs that spark from the battery to turn that starter to be able to start the reaction going, where it can, quote, digest that gasoline that's coming in from the gas tank and translate it into actual, tangible, usable motion for the car, which enables it to go down the road. And that electricity doesn't end with just that little jump start from the battery that turns the starter. Once that starter turns and the engine is running, the engine then translates the power from the car into motion. It's going to translate the power from the gasoline into motion forward. But it's also going to power a wheel that turns that generates electricity through the car that runs your instruments, your gauges, your rear view camera, and your radio, and your fan for your heater. There's two types of energy in there. And most importantly, as we all have experienced, annoyingly, when our check engine light comes on, right? What do you do when your check engine light comes on? You go to your mechanic and he comes out with a device. He plugs in right under your dashboard to a terminal that's there, and he's able to communicate with the car. The car is constantly communicating. So there's communication powered by electricity. So electricity is of paramount importance. And I wanted to give you that additional analogy, not to be cliche or cute, but to give you something to think about in terms of, okay, I understand basic electricity. and it flows in a circuit in a circular pattern. For it to be able to flow in the first place must be in that pattern. But also, I want you to understand a practical application of it before we get into the complexity of the human body. Because I think we can both agree that the human body is definitely more complex than your automobile. But if you look at the complexity of the human body, first of all, it's an absolute miracle that it works in the first place. Without our knowledge of the, quote, assembly line that the human body was assembled on, without any knowledge from any salesman who sold us on our particular body that we're possessing right now, we really had no way of knowing how this thing was manufactured. And there was a lot of guesswork and reverse engineering that had to be done by scientific discovery to be able to figure it out. But we have figured it out and have it down to the level of automobiles now. So it's a good analogy to understand that. Now let's get into that body that you're sitting in right now. Would you consider that it's in a great state of repair? Would you consider it's in showroom condition? If you were to sell it and look up the Kelley Blue Book value of your body right now, would you rate it very good condition, new condition, showroom condition, poor condition, good condition? Think about that first. Because what I want you to understand is good, perfect showroom condition is actually the ultimate for the body. And it is an ideal state that can be attained because it's part of Mother Nature's blueprint, predicated on an electrical system. And this is where chiropractors come into the equation. It's not because they're mechanics. Now, don't confuse my auto analogy with the fact that an auto mechanic would be analogous to a chiropractor. Chiropractors are not the mechanic. The mechanics would be surgeons or people who specialize in emergency intervention, where something actually breaks, a broken bone. They're going to put that thing back together. They're going to put a new part in. These are the mechanics. But the specialists of the human body are the ones who really understand how power should flow. And they're the troubleshooters of that power flow. And they're also the enablers of that power flow. Now, what power flow is this? Let's look at what actually is flowing through your body. Why is there electricity in there? If you intake fuel and you burn fuel, why would you need electricity? The answer is communication. Now, I'm sure you can agree with me, your body is a miraculous machine. And look at how it's assembled. All the different parts have their little piece of the puzzle. They all operate on their own fuels, but they must be in communication with each other and work in tandem and in cooperation. If they're not doing that, you get trouble. To be honest, there are two communication systems, but today's talk is on electricity. We will do a future talk on the chemical communication system, but we're going to talk today about the electrical communication system because it runs the chemical communication system. This is the most important system in the entire body. What are its parts? You have the brain and you have the rest of the nervous system. The brain and the nerves are central command. Just like your computer has a motherboard, so does the body have the brain and the nerves. It keeps the organs and glands and body systems and muscles and everything communicating with each other and with the motherboard, with central command, with the brain. The brain is actually busily coordinating thousands of activities per second. And there's a flow of electricity. The electricity has to follow the pattern of the way electricity flows. So that means if the brain puts out an electrical message, it must be able to receive it back. And to do that, you have to be on a loop system. You have to be on a circuit. Now, just like you can cut a power line or interfere with it or short it out, tap into that electricity and make it less. So, can you mess up the body's flow of electricity and dampen it or tamp it out? And that is more serious than it sounds. It doesn't appear that way when you're experiencing, but it is way crucial. But we'll get into that in a minute. Let's talk about the actual ideal flow of electricity. Let's talk about that for a moment, because that's the important part. That's the goal. Too many times in wellness care, health care, medical care, we lose sight of what the actual goal is. The goal isn't to recover from illness. The goal is to live well, to foster ideal prime function. the function that the body was designed by its blueprint to accomplish. That's what we need to look at in the ideal. So what does the ideal body do? If that electricity is flowing and all those little circuits and subcircuits are set up to run their routines and be able to communicate with a gland and tell it to talk to another gland and be able to communicate to the digestive system to get it to digest, all of these functions should be operating in their optimum and no problems should be occurring. And most problems trace back to this type of interference. It's one of the most underrated interferences there is in the human body. Because what do we look at when we attempt medical care? This does not say emergency intervention isn't needed. Those mechanics are absolutely 100% vital in our society, because when it does get to that, and especially when we don't understand this concept to take care of ourselves in this manner, we get into situations like that. But what does that concentrate on? It concentrates on the end result. That would be comparable to a tree 10 miles from your house falling on a power line and cutting it, and you figuring out in your electrical panel and the circuitry throughout your house and checking the wiring, figuring out there's no electricity on it, and then going out and buying your own power generator that will then generate electricity in the house, instead of calling the power company and figuring out if there was an outage somewhere. Now, none of us would do that. We wouldn't even think to do that. We don't go to our electrical panel first. Perhaps we do just to eliminate it as a possibility that we didn't trigger a circuit breaker, or we might go outside and look if the neighbors have power. What we don't do is forget to call the power company to find out if there's a line down somewhere. And that is the nature of this subject. That electricity needs to flow in a circuit. And what we really need to do, in addition to any emergency intervention that needs to be done, some vital appliance that's in your house that absolutely needs to operate must be handled. Maybe it's a medical device or something like this. So the generator would be needed, but we would still have to look for the cause of the problem. And that is the job of a chiropractor. 90% of what a chiropractor does, no matter what type of chiropractic he practices therapeutically, that is 90% of a chiropractor's action. So whether it's nutrition response testing or whether it's straight chiropractic adjustments, no matter. Now let's talk about how we end up at the therapy part. What would that compare to in our electric company example? When the tree falls 10 miles from your house, perhaps there are engineers who go around and diagnose to find where that line is down, or to analyze the reports that come in from customers who see the line down in front of their house and also have no power. After that assessment is done, the linemen come in and reattach the line or remove the branch from the line. So they remove the interference and they restore the flow of electricity. It's as basic as that, and chiropractic is literally as basic as that when you break it down to its fundamentals. Isn't that great? How simple it is? It's way less complicated than you've probably heard about, even if you've experienced chiropractic care or nutrition response testing. If you've experienced it before, you may not have seen it as that simple. It may have appeared very complex. And it does appear very complex, because there are intricacies and complexities of human anatomy. But when you break them down, it's really simple communication. This harmony was simple. When scientists researched it, it looked complicated. They had unusual solutions, but as they evolved, as more information came up, they were able to resolve the problem of the human body. And chiropractors played a major role. As a matter of fact, the very first chiropractor, a gentleman by the name of Palmer, over 125 years ago, sort of stumbled upon this in his research. He wasn't even directly looking for it. He accidentally found it out and then created a legacy on from there, operating on a simplicity. And that's the nature of what's happening when you see your chiropractor. This should be where your mind is at. This should be where your head is at. This is your target, and this is the target of the chiropractor. How does that relate now to treatment? It has everything to do with treatment, because when you isolate the right problem, when you find the power line that's down, rather than try to buy a generator and have to keep putting gasoline in it to run the power in your house and maintain it for the rest of your life, by finding that down power line, you restore proper flow of electricity and everything simplifies from there. There's no lifelong struggle. There's no, quote, live with it. Now, this isn't a pie-in-the-sky miracles for everyone. I myself do what I do because I received a miracle from a chiropractor just on that simplicity. My life was filled with more and more complexity, more and more of these, quote, generator type of handlings, live with it type of conditions. And once we isolated it down to a simplicity, a breakdown of communication, life was then opened up to me. And no longer did I have to live with the things that were there, nor do you. But it doesn't mean things can't go bad in the body. Sometimes it gets to the point where things wear out, things actually break, and they can't be repaired by simply restoring electricity. But you would be surprised how much healing can happen. So this means if medical care is needed, it should be sought after. This doesn't mean medical care is obsolete. It's for emergency purposes to maintain someone and keep them alive, quite literally in many ways. But while that's being done, to trace down the source of the life energy that flows through the body itself, as for that subject, restoring that energy to its fullest turns on the blueprint functions of the human body. And one of those blueprint functions is to heal itself. If you don't believe me, next time you cut yourself, watch what the body naturally does without any assistance from you. Yes, you sometimes have to put a Band-Aid on it or get a stitch. But if it's even a paper cut, no big deal, no Band-Aid required. Watch what your body does. The body is going to regenerate that tissue and heal it. And you'd be surprised that when you turn on communication that has been suppressed, the healing power of the body. And aren't you wondering right now what potential healing you might have that you didn't know you have? Wouldn't it be worth finding out? That's what we're about here at Breakthrough Healthcare. That's why we're called Breakthrough Healthcare. This is about making that breakthrough. That's what breakthrough means. And I'm here to share that with you and make sure that you really understand that. Dr. Haz and the rest of the crew here are here to make sure that point not only gets home to you, but is brought home physically to you to make sure that you are able to take full advantage of it. And I share that goal too, and I've been talking about it some 25 plus years now and counting. And I never intend to stop talking about it because that is a powerful message. That is something everyone needs to know, including you. So look, if you have anything going on, even things that you thought were things that come with the territory of the human body, things that you have to endure or suffer through or live with because you think it's part of the human condition, and there's nothing your body can do about it, you are due for a consultation with Dr. Haz. This is what I'd like you to do. I'd like to make sure that you schedule that consultation. And also, let your friends and family know as well, because assuredly, they have things going on. So your next step would actually be a consultation with Dr. Haz to use 90% of his knowledge on figuring it out. Figuring out the problem is 90% of the job. It's only 10% from there because it's easy to resolve once you understand exactly why it's happening. If you don't know why, it's a lot of guesswork. You might get lucky, but more often than not, you don't. That's all we got for today for this episode of Breakthrough Radio. Make sure you schedule that consultation with the doc. And by the way, let your friends and family know as well that those types of answers are here. And hey, get them listening to this episode or any episode of this podcast. People have the most eye-opening realizations when they just listen to a few minutes of this, when they start to see how simplistic the human body runs. So give it to your friends and family as well and have them call us to be able to get hooked up with the same type of consultation that you've taken advantage of here and find out once and for all what's been going on, find out what their options are to do something about it to empower them. And if you haven't done so, make sure you do call the office yourself. As a reminder, 904-260-1993. We're at 11481 Old St. Augustine Road, right here in Jacksonville, ready and waiting. Find us on Facebook as well and communicate to us there. And you can also visit the website at breakthroughhc.com. So here's to you and your next breakthrough. Right here at Breakthrough Healthcare, I'm Frank Sardella, and I'm about to break out of here. On behalf of Dr. Randy and his entire crew, here's to your next breakthrough. Keep it right here and stay tuned. I'll see you in the next episode. Be good. Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Breakthrough Radio Podcast, a broadcast wellness production powered by Breakthrough Healthcare. Executive producer and host, Frank Sardella. For more information, visit breakthroughradiopodcast.com.